Hello and welcome to episode 24 of Off the Bandstand. My name is Christian Wiggs. I am your host. Today's episode is Kellin Hanas, an undeniably, absolutely killing trumpet player who has far more vocabulary than any 18-year-old I've ever heard. Kellin is currently studying over at the Manhattan School of Music, but her accolades start well before she was accepted into the school. Back last year, she was accepted into Carnegie Hall's NYO Jazz under the direction of Sean Jones. She was also a 2020 and is a 2021 YoungArts Winner in Jazz Trumpet and a co-winner of the Downbeat magazine's High School Jazz Improviser Award, just to name a few. In this episode, we really run the gamut of things to talk about, from our favorite SNL cast and cast members, playing paid big band gigs in middle school, advocacy for women in jazz, and kind of that dynamic of being a young person in jazz who is really excelling at such a high and fast rate. And then also how, contrary to popular belief, the Hornets in Vancouver do not share the same politeness as the Canadian people. So I really loved talking to Kellin and getting to know her a little bit over the course of, this hour episode. And she's just a blast and incredibly sweet, and I can't wait to hopefully talk to her again very soon. But now let's switch over into the releases of the week. So the first one that I want to kick off, being that it is December, this is the perfect time to be plugging all of those Christmas records that jazz musicians are putting out. So back in 2015, someone who I guess has been most influential in my life in just terms of kind of starting my jazz career is a guy named Tony DeSere, a great pianist and vocalist up in New York. He put out a Christmas record called Christmas Home in 2015, and this is just kind of the perfect holiday record. To talk about it a bit, he uses a small studio orchestra, which instantly gives that kind of nostalgic feeling of those intimate family evenings of drinking hot chocolate, decorating the tree, spending time with family, just everything you would see in kind of a picturesque holiday movie. That is the exact feeling that you get while listening to this record. So if you would like to learn more about this record, you can go over to tonydesere.com. He has a really cool marketing strategy where for this record, instead of just the typical kind of square CD case, he has made Christmas cards where it is basically everything you would have in a typical CD, but it's more rectangular, obviously Christmas card, and it has a CD in there. And if you want to purchase one of those for yourself, you can go on his website and they are autographed and he'll make it out to you. And then also, if you want to send these out as kind of gifts to extended family and give like the gift of music this year, then you can do that and buy them in bulk at a really discounted rate. I think you can get like 10 for $75. So really, really amazing things to support musicians in this time and also give a really sweet and meaningful gift to family members and loved ones across the country in a safe way. So anyways, tonydesere.com, go and check that out. And then the second release of the week is not a Christmas plug, but Thomas Wanglinski last week, or I guess maybe 2 weeks ago, released Iguana Beat, which is a tasty, groovy 1 minute and 35 second treat that is inspired by the new sights that he's been seeing in Miami since he moved over there to go to Frost at the University of Miami. So go and check that out. Everything that Thomas puts out is just, I feel like I could almost meditate to it. It's so groovy. It just puts you in a nice trance. And I think he even put on Instagram, if you like it, amazing. You can listen to it over and over again. Worst case scenario, it's 1.5 minutes of your time. So go over and check that out. That's on Spotify. If you want to follow Thomas as well, you can go over to his Instagram, which is Thomas C. Wanglinski. We have that down here, of course, as always. And then if you want to support his other projects, you can go over to thomaswanglinski.bandcamp.com and you can find out everything he's doing there. I don't believe his most recent record, called Adjustments Made, that we've plugged in the past, is on Bandcamp, but you can find that on Spotify and the iTunes store and go and support that release directly as well. So plenty of things to go check out. And of course, like last week, Doc Watkins' Christmas record, so great. And we'll be plugging more as December kind of rolls through. So let's go ahead and, oh, one last thing on Thomas. He just had a monk show. Since we're about to talk about the monk shows, he had a monk show that was this past Sunday on December 6th. It's so good. And the horn arrangement of having saxophone and trombone in the same gig without trumpet, I was a little skeptical at first. I mean, I've never doubted Thomas ever, but I was a little skeptical, and I heard it and I think it works fabulously. So go and check that out. But moving on to the upcoming monk shows of the week. Tonight, December 10th, Thursday, you can check out the Alton Sinclair Trio. This is a cordless trio. I'm going to be checking it out. I love cordless trios. It just really explores the space a lot more of what you can do. And so I'm going to go and support Alton tonight. You should too. And then on Saturday, December 12th, Woody Witt from Houston is going to come with his quartet and play a bit. And, Woody is amazing. I've heard him plenty of times over online and all those different live stream concerts. So I'm going to go and check that out as well. And then next Tuesday is another Austin Jazz Society Project Safety Net show, which is Ephraim Owens Quintet. So go and check that out. Again, Austin Jazz Society doing the most for jazz musicians in town right now by supporting them in that emergency fund to help pay bills for at-risk and vulnerable jazz musicians in the Austin city limits. So if you can and would like to make a charitable donation, you can go and do that over at Austin Jazz Society's website, which we put down below. And you can also do it in real time while the show is happening on Tuesday, December 15th for Ephraim Owens. So plenty of things to check out this week, including this episode, all the past episodes, monk shows. They're all cataloged on YouTube, and they're all just of the utmost quality. Colin Shook is doing a really amazing thing over there. Got to sing his praises every week because he's really kind of, not single-handedly, but in conjunction with a few other people here in town, really kind of keeping the jazz scene alive and keeping us all connected in a time where we are very kind of spaced out and socially distanced. So anyways, let's get into today's episode. Here is episode 24, Kellin Hanas. This is Off the Bandstand. Thing in the world is if I just started calling you by the wrong name for the entire episode.
As long as you say Kellin Hanas, a lot of people think it's Kellin Hanas.
I feel like there's an air of sophistication that people are like, oh yes, Hanas, right?
Right, right.
Trying to give a little bit more of that vibe, right?
Yeah, maybe I should just go along with it because Hanas is not very nice.
For sure. And there's always something about like correcting your name that even though it's your name, it almost feels like a little pompous to the person. Like you're having to correct them like right off the bat.
Yeah.
But it's your name. You have the license to do so. What a great little name tangent to start there.
Yeah.
Well, how are you? How's everything going?
I'm great. It's really nice to meet you. Thank you for having me on this and doing this.
Of course. Yeah. Well, I mean, these episodes too, I kind of like said in the message, but it was like kind of birthed out of, I'd wanted to do this for a while, but especially once the pandemic hit, it was like, all right, the first month is like the welcome break and like, I'll catch up on the movies that I didn't get to see because we were gigging all the time and binge watch stuff. And then at like, I don't know, April, after like 3 weeks, it was like,
right.
Ooh, we gotta
work forward. Yeah.
Which I feel like for you though, and we'll definitely talk more about it in a bit, but like I feel like for you, it might have been the opposite case because you were doing NYO Jazz at that time, right?
Yeah, around, I think that was in June or July or something like that. But I mean, it was just it was still boring. Yeah. Like they did a good job, but it was still, I had nothing to do.
For sure. Well, before we officially dive in, I want to thank today's sponsor of the episode, Essentia Water. Essentia Water, you're not a sponsor yet, but you really could be, not only of the show, but of Kellin's music in general. So Cheers to Essentia Water.
Here's to
Um,
Essentia. I'm kind of off-brand right now. I have the Dasani.
well, that's okay. You're like playing hard to get. You're trying to like reel them in. Like, look, Dasani's already offered me like a
Make
full
them want
right.
it.
You've already been offered the ambassadorship to Dasani, and now you just need Essentia to get on board. So
Come on, Essentia. I would be so good for them.
here's the thing: this bottle, and everyone watching at this point in the episode is just going to go, "They're really just talking about water." This bottle is obnoxious. It is obnoxiously large, but I feel like also whenever you're like gigging and when you have like a full day of worth of stuff, it just makes sense, you
And
know.
it's nice electrolyte water. You lose electrolytes throughout the day. I mean, I drink like 3 of those a day, you
Oh,
know?
really?
Yeah.
Whoa, that's a lot of the scholarship money going to Essentia Water.
No, basically.
For sure. Well, actually, I was going to talk about your playing to start off, but I'd love to hear more about NYO Jazz because, like, I saw like I was kind of going through like all of your stories last night and just kind of like recapping on things. And I noticed that you were like freshman year me is screaming and like the first thing whenever you like saw that you were announced for it. So what did that look like just as far as like you coming up and getting into jazz? We'll get into more of that too, but just like when did NYO Jazz get on the radar?
So there was this band called the Grammy Band, which was like the high school all-star band, and they played at the Grammys, and that was like the band that everybody wanted to get into.
Right.
My sophomore year was the last year it existed because the following year they ran out of money and they were like, we're going to stop doing it. So that was the year that NYO Jazz, I think it was 2018. 2018 is when the first season of NYO Jazz started, right when Grammy Band ended. So everybody saw that and they were like, oh, Sean Jones is leading the band and they get to tour around, out of the country. And
Yeah.
so that kind of became the new thing. And some of my friends from Illinois got into it my sophomore year and I saw them doing all this stuff and I was like, whoa, I was really, really bad sophomore year, but I was like, man, if I can make this band, I mean, that's going to be life-changing.
Sure.
So, I didn't try out until this past year. But yeah, I think like around 3 years ago is when it kind of popped up and that since has become like the big high school thing that everybody's trying to get into.
Yeah, I mean, I was familiar enough with Grammy Band and have some friends who have been in Grammy Band, but like one of my friends from like Jackson, where I grew up, it's a small town south of Houston, Texas, I think was actually in Grammy Band with Benny back in high school. So like quite a while ago, but I guess I didn't know that it ended, but I'm sort of ashamed to say, well, I guess now maybe I feel a little bit better about it that it only, started becoming a thing in 2019 after Grammy Band ended. But I had become aware of it because I worship the ground that Kurt Elling walks on. And so I saw that Kurt was doing a show with them at like Carnegie and then was doing like that Asian tour. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So, and then got into it there. And then that's where I first heard Summer Camargo too. And I was just like, whoa. And I was like, are these guys in college? And then I realized it was all like high schoolers or just like fresh out of high school, whatever that qualification is. And it immediately made me feel like terrible about myself and also like hit the shed because I was like, oh my God, like these people can throw down and they're like several years younger. So there's something about that that is very humbling and inspiring at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So coming up, were your parents musicians? Like how did, like in your childhood, how did you take music seriously or lack thereof? And what was that progression like?
Okay, so this is going to sound really, really fake. I say this every time I'm asked this question.
Okay.
When I was 4, like around 4 or 5, somewhere in there, I had a dream, like an actual dream, like at night when I was, I was playing the trumpet on stage. And I remember it so vividly. And
Sure.
I told my mom about it. But obviously, like, you're 4, you're 5, you're not going to do anything about it. Like, it was a dream. But my grandma's a music teacher, so neither of my parents are musicians. My mom likes to say she is because she sings along to Earth, Wind, and Fire. But
Sure.
um, yeah, my grandma's like the musician, and so she was like, "Oh, we got to get her an instrument so she won't become a loser." Basically. And they took me to the music store when I was 7, and I instantly, like, right away, I was like, "Give me the trumpet! I know I need the trumpet. I want the trumpet." And they told me no. They were like, "You're too small." The music store people were like, "You're a girl. The
Yeah.
little girls don't play trumpet." Blah blah blah. So they gave me the flute and the clarinet and all of these other, violin, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna." I'm gonna purposely be really bad at everything I play until they give me the trumpet.
Whoa. Okay.
So I basically forced my way into it, and they couldn't say no because
Sure.
I sound really bad at everything else.
Yeah, well, like 4 years old, I mean, like there has to be some sort of you had to have been exposed to the trumpet in some kind of way. So for like a 4 year old to be able to I mean, like age 3, we're just like realizing like object permanence, right? So like here's a whole other instrument. Was it something that like your grandmother had introduced you to, or was it just like Saturday morning cartoons or just seeing stuff?
It was. I'm almost positive. There's. Do you know the children's band, the Wiggles?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. Oh my God, I was the biggest Wiggles fan. I was like obsessed with them, and so they
Uh,
had this. There was like this one VHS tape that I would always play, like when I was little. And it had one of the scenes was like this Irish guy or this Scotch, I don't know, but they played this Irish tune and had Irish dancers come out, and this guy was playing this little cornet, and I thought it was so cool. I like had never seen anything like it before, and I'm pretty sure that's my first like introduction to the trumpet.
yeah. Whoa. Yeah. And whenever you said, "Do you know the Wiggles?" I was like, oh, yes, because that was the source of, oh, so much playful bullying in middle school or whatever, in elementary school. Not bullying, like bullying, but like my last name is Wiggs.
Really?
That's not a very common last name. Everyone was watching the Wiggles. It was like that whole thing. But, anyways, yeah, like, because I was going to say, I mean, you just at this point have chops for days just like listening to your transcriptions. I mean, and that's not just like an empty compliment of like, oh, you sound so great. Like honestly, like we were listening to it last night, and Lydia, who has had her fair share over the past 5 years of our relationship listening to jazz when she is not someone who would willingly listen to jazz, but she appreciates it, right? She was like, whoa. She was like, who is that? Like, that's incredible, because I was just watching on my phone. But like sometimes people, or like sometimes the answer to this question is as easy as like listening, like all the time. Some of it is, we grew up with our parents around it, but like, where did jazz come in for you? Like, when was your first experience hearing it? And then also like, I feel like we have our experience hearing jazz, and then like the moment that it's like boom, and it just hits in that way that it's now you're addicted and there's no going back. So what was that like?
Yeah, so my grandma always played show tunes when I was younger and stuff like that. And when I was younger, I was like, oh man, jazz is old people music. I was listening to like, the Minecraft music and all the, I was a gamer, right? And then I got to middle school, and they had the middle school jazz band, and I saw the word band and joined because I was like, okay, trumpet. And my middle school band director, he was a big jazz fanatic. He played trumpet too, and so I was in the middle school band, and I didn't really care about it. I was like, I'm here, I'm playing, right? And then my band director decided that he was going to go teach 5th grade, and my band director and I were really, really close. He was like my second father. I was really, really upset, so he offered me. He's like, I got this big band. This is like 7th grade. He says,
Yeah.
I have this big band that I play with every Monday night. If you want to just come and sit in every week, and you can, perform with us, and,
Yeah.
just come and play. And so I was like, okay. So I started showing up to this band, and it was a bunch of old guys. So you got this little 13-year-old girl next to like 70-year-olds. It's
Sure.
and they played all of the standards, just a bunch of American songbook tunes, and a lot of Glenn Miller stuff. And I think around a year of being into that, it was like you said, just that click. I was like, I've never felt this way about any kind of music before. Like it was such a revelation. And I realized, like, I don't think I want to be doing anything else for the rest of my life except for playing this music. Like, this is so important to me. So, and that's when the listening started, and, finding out about all these bands, I just went deeper into.
Well, so playing in a big band, like it's seventh grade, that's usually when people are just starting to figure out like, here's the, concert A scale or whatever. And like people are not, but like you're like actively on the stand, and like whether or not it was like a paid gig, like you're still like getting that active, like, and what was it, a paid gig like at that point, or was it just like a?
Yeah, he got me my first paid gig, and we went out and played at like country clubs and different dance places, and it was really, really great experience, and I got money for it.
Yeah. What part were you holding down?
I don't remember. I'm pretty sure they probably had me on like 2 or 3 or something, because it was me, my band director, and then this old guy named Jim who could barely breathe.
So he was on
But
four for sure.
yeah,
Right.
right.
Well, that's crazy because like obviously like the second chair is usually like the solo chair. So were you like improvising at that point?
Yeah, I mean, the band wasn't, it was a bunch of guys who did it for fun, so they weren't killing, right? It was
Uh-huh.
just, this nice little community band. So yeah, I soloed, and I don't think I improvised. I think it was mostly written solos, like from the parts and stuff. Um, but yeah, like that was my like first experience like soloing outside of middle school and stuff.
Yeah. So then was your old band director the person who like started giving you like the people who to listen to, and like who were those introductory people for you?
I didn't really start listen. That was a like when I was in this band, I was kind of listening more to like the different dance bands,
Sure.
like swing era, like 40s and 30s and stuff like that. I wasn't really aware of people like Miles or Clifford or any of the main trumpet gods. But he definitely gave me a whole bunch of, I mean, everything we played in that band is, I'm looking back at it now and I'm like, oh, we play these at jam sessions all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Well, too, another thing is that I like ashamedly had to look up where like Wheaton was because I'm not super familiar with Illinois because I've never been to Illinois.
Yeah.
But Illinois, so I mean, I'm in Austin, Texas. So like literally, there's no joke. You could drive 13 hours and still be in Texas.
Wow.
So for us, it's like, Dallas is like, oh yeah, Dallas isn't that far away, but like from Austin, it's like a 3.5 hour drive. So I was like, okay, let's see where Wheaton is. And I saw that Wheaton was like 35 minutes away from Chicago. So, or at least,
Yeah.
I'll let you say, yeah.
Like an hour and a half on a regular traffic day.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, yeah, that makes sense with traffic. Okay. I guess I was looking at it at night, so it was probably not
Yeah.
giving me the, but it's like close enough to where you could be like checking out the scene there too. And I'm curious, like while you were coming up, if you went into the city at all to go check that stuff out, and like how the scene was doing, and if there were anybody specific that you were like, oh yeah, this person's killing, I'm going to try to make it in to see as many of their gigs as possible.
Yeah, so it's really weird for me because I do live close enough to Chicago where I could, go up there pretty often, but
Sure.
because, I didn't get my driver's license until I was 17, so I got it a little late. My
Gotcha.
mom hates driving. She'd only drive, like if I had a gig like for one of my like little local bands or something, she would take me. But if I wanted to go downtown to see somebody, it would be super hard to do because I'm not comfortable driving to the city by myself, and my mom just was like, no.
Yeah, sure.
So I never really, I think I've only been to downtown Chicago probably maybe 4 times in my life, 5 times. And I haven't seen any shows down there. I haven't been to any of the clubs.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of, I haven't really checked out the Chicago scene that much.
Well, how did that feel like, kind of jumping forward, how did that feel like the change of, and I know you've been in New York for, I guess, what, probably 5 months now,
Yeah,
or 5 months,
4.
something like that. Yeah. So, and I know obviously like the clubs aren't crazy open right now because of everything that's going on, but there are things like I don't know, like Benny's holding the Craftsman Jam and like does Terremoto and all that different stuff. And I see people like you and Veronica and April Varner and all these people who are like going over there and checking it out. So how does that feel now, kind of being immersed a little bit more in that culture where there are those jams, where there's the clubs like all around pretty easily at your disposal?
Yeah, no, it's really crazy because, people assume that because I'm from Illinois that I'm used to having this scene and going to sessions and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, there's nothing around me. There's nobody to play with. Like, there's a couple kids from like the local college that I've been playing with, but other than that, there's nothing, no jams. And so I came here, and all of a sudden, like, there's a jam every day. If you want
Yeah.
to go somewhere to play, you can go literally like down the street to the Craftsman. You can go to all these other places.
Mhm.
Um, and everybody here can play. There's a whole list of people that you can use like for anything you want. It's
Sure.
crazy. It's like a culture shock.
Yeah. Sorry, a very inopportune time for me to take a drink of this very, very large, very inconveniently shaped Essentia Water. You know,
No.
if you're listening, make the bottle smaller. All right. Yeah, well, that also is very intriguing to me as well. And I think you'll find that I'm a very curious person, so I'll like latch on to things and I might just like talk it to death. But so you were saying that you didn't have that many people to like play around, obviously in your immediate area. And I found that like I can shed all day, but it won't teach me the lessons that I need to learn until like I'm on the stand. You have that like split second thing of like where you could have been, practicing all these different licks that were going to fit over these changes. And then like in the moment, it's just totally is a completely different ball game. So even in like in the gigs that you've had and also like the jam sessions and stuff, how do you feel like that has kind of kicked your playing into like another place or into another gear?
Literally the week or two after I arrived here, I noticed that my playing like reached another level like instantly because my practicing for the past 3-4 years has consisted of literally just backing tracks
Mhm.
and bad rhythm section players that don't know how to interact. So I never really learned how to interact, how to listen, right? And so I got here and I have these people that are waiting for me to give them information. And I'm like, oh, this is not just a straight ahead backing track. These people are here for me. So I don't know. My ear's been tuning into it, and I'm not there yet. I'm still learning about how to, navigate that kind of thing. But instantly, a different kind of playing completely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, I think sometimes that is the best way of learning. I mean, not to knock schooling at all, because obviously like schooling is incredibly important on every level of like bachelor's, master's, doctorate. But, and I got my degree in opera studies because the school that I went to at the time didn't have like a jazz vocal
Oh,
program. It's Texas State. It's just south of Austin. And really, I mean, a little bit of background. Whenever I was 18, I got this opportunity. Do you know a jazz singer named Tony Dessert?
I've heard of him.
Okay, he's up in New York. He's like I think north of the city, pianist and vocalist. And I got this opportunity. It was just like this competition thing to open for the Houston Symphony Orchestra with him. And so that at the time I was working as a busboy at a Mexican food restaurant in the mall. And I was like, here it is. This is my big break. I'm going to quit my job and everything's going to be roses. And I did the gig and it was unpaid, but it was like a really great gig. And then I like didn't have a gig for like 3 months and I was like, ooh, maybe I should have rethought this decision. But then I started breaking into like the Houston scene a little bit. And I was like, oh, well, I don't need to go to school. I'll just be a full-time jazz musician and whatever I'll learn. And then my brother was going to Texas State and he was like, hey man, knock it down a few pegs. Like, yeah, that was a cool gig, but like, got a lot to learn. And so then I went to Texas State kind of reluctantly. Anyways, like going back to like the actual schooling aspect of it, like doing an opera degree I was really just doing that for the classical training so I could use my voice to sing with a big band. Because I think that's another thing with singers is that you can sing with a combo, but if your voice is super small, whenever you're singing up against 10 horns, it's just not really carry. But then like, because I wasn't doing all of that in school of like the specific jazz stuff, even though I was taking a few jazz courses, once I was actually on the stand, it was like, oh, whoa, like not only of the typical singer tropes, which I tried to like eliminate pretty quickly, but like the thing of knowing your keys, knowing what style you want to do the tune in, counting off your own tunes, knowing a handful, you know, at least at the beginning, knowing a handful of like intros and outros where you can communicate to the band. And you're right, it wasn't as convenient as like the iRealB that was on my on my phone, being like, boom, here we go. So anyways, off of me, back to you. One thing that I was also curious about is that I saw like on the NYO Jazz profile that was like on the snapshot on your Instagram that you were like, you love comedy. And so a lot of this show too was kind of based off of a podcast I listened to called You Made It Weird with Pete Holmes, because Pete Holmes is like one of my favorite comedians. And I was curious, do you have like any favorite like stand-ups that you listen to or just comics in general?
I'm more into sketch comedy. Like I love SNL, like all of the old SNL and everything. But I love man, who are my favorite comedians? I love John Mulaney. Oh my God, he's so funny. Who else? Kristen Wiig, she's hilarious. Amy Poehler, Tina Fey, Will Ferrell. Just all of these. Gilda Radner is my favorite. I don't know if you know who she is, but
of course, yeah.
Oh my God, best yeesh, rest in peace. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But yeah, no, I love comedy and I love making people laugh, and so I want to kind of incorporate that somehow in whatever I do.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed that like you're and not to beat a dead horse, but with the Essentia thing, it's very silly. Like you're very fun. And I think that kind of like breaks the stereotype of jazz musicians where it's like we take ourselves a little too seriously or like we're like maybe aloof or anything like that. And I think it's encouraging to see someone who like is at your level so killing and also just like very fun, just like, yeah, everything's a good time. I think that just like makes it a little bit more approachable of music to people who are like not necessarily jazz aficionados,
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't get me wrong, when we play this music, it should be serious and it should be, we should be paying respects to the music as it should be. But at the same time, I don't like it when, people don't interact with me when I'm watching, like I think that we should be ourselves instead of trying to be this, image of, oh, I'm so serious and now I'm going to like, that's not who I am. So I thought, just start showing the people who I really am. So then when they meet me, they don't think I'm a deadbeat.
Right. Exactly. And I think another thing too, is that it like you were saying, it speaks to like the personality of the individual. Like some people in jazz, we can look at any number of people have had really troubling lives, especially people of color. Like, and this music is built by people of color, and they have had to, I mean, there's like the story, right, of like Miles Davis being outside Birdland and like being on his break and then being accosted, hit over the head and taken away, couldn't play his second set. So like, there's certainly license and like, obviously like it's totally understandable that some people would be a little bit more, and the music is like that therapy, but it doesn't mean that is a organic kind of setting, and for people to kind of be like, oh yeah, I just it's like come on, man, like don't
like the thought of that seriousness. Yeah.
Right. And the guest last week, who's a club owner in San Antonio, his name's Doc Watkins, he was saying like, especially too, if you're trying to put on a persona, the audience is going to see through that. And you can only live a dual personality for so long before you don't know which is which,
Right.
Yeah. I was going to also ask what your favorite like era of SNL was, but then you started naming off Gilda Radner and Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. And I was like, okay, that puts it right into like what, like the late 90s, early 2000s, like that kind of thing.
I think I kind of stretch between like the original cast, 1975 to 1980. That's like one of my favorite eras, and then like 2005-ish, 90s.
Sure.
Now it's good too, but yeah, like I like all of it.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, swinging back over to NYO Jazz. So, that experience, especially with Sean Jones, like, I kind of felt a little dumb, like tripping over my words whenever I talked to him at Jazz Congress this past January before everything shut down. And I just was kind of in awe just because he's like this incredible player, but he was like so nice and so approachable. And I feel like he has this, and you could chime in, interrupt me, and correct me anywhere that I'm wrong, but I feel like he has this, not aura, but just like a presence of being this incredibly knowledgeable master of the craft and of the instrument. But especially when it came to NYO Jazz, it also felt like he was both like your biggest advocate and friend, but also this kind of like father figure in the same way, like very taking care of everybody. So I guess I would love to hear about that experience, just being under his direction.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, everything that you said was like 100% true. It's difficult because, this year obviously it was virtual.
Sure.
The thing that really speaks about that is even though it was virtual, we still had really deep conversations with Sean. He'd teach us the music, he'd tell us what to do, he'd tell us how to do it. But then we would just have hour sessions, 2-hour sessions where he would tell us, stories about his life. He's gone through some hard stuff, and he, told us about it. And he's like, what are you guys going through? And we all went through, all of the kids, they were like, I was like, oh, I'm stressed out because of COVID in college. I got to leave for college during a pandemic. I don't know what I'm going to do. And he gave us all advice. So he really does. I mean, especially from what I've heard about the in-person NYO like years from all of my friends, like he cares so much about the kids, and I think he's one of the best jazz educators alive. Like he's amazing. And he's just such a caring person. And like you said, he's one of the best trumpet players alive right now. But it's just crazy how somebody can be so talented and so masterful, and at the same time such like an amazing person. There's so few of those people.
Yeah, I think it also kind of goes to show like the welcoming nature of like the younger generation, and that's something I'd like to talk about too. But just I remember at the Jazz Congress, like I think it was the peak like keynote like speech was the panel with like John Faddis and Sean Jones and Wynton Marsalis, and I believe it was Bria Schoenberg that was there too. And yeah, and then Summer was on there, and it's like you have all these people who are like either the old guard or kind of that middle generation of people who we also like crazy revere. But then you have someone who is like very young, but obviously absolutely deserves that chair in that forum. And then like even I think it was either Wynton or it was John Faddis, but they said like, I'm sure you're wondering like who this person is over here, but like if you don't know her name already, you will like very, very soon. And I think that is something that's incredibly encouraging about like the top people in the scene welcoming like younger people into the fold and not saying like, oh yeah, like whatever, they still have a lot to learn, but saying like, no, we're going to like cultivate this because it kind of eliminates that, that kind of vibey nature, especially in smaller scenes where it's like, oh, you have to prove your worth. It's like, no, if we really care about this music living on and we're already fighting the uphill battle of trying to keep this music relevant to like the layman, like general audiences, the worst thing we could do is alienate the people who are earnestly trying to further the craft. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I think that the people especially on that panel that really welcomed, so I was there watching her. Oh my god, I was so proud of her.
Yeah.
But yeah, they welcomed her with open arms, and a lot of the jazz educators of today like do the same thing with all of us. So I think that's really important, making sure that the young people are getting involved and getting good support.
Yeah. What was the master class with Jacob Collier like?
Oh my gosh. It was it was really weird because we thought it would just be us. We thought it would just be NYO Jazz because he's more of a jazz guy, right? But all the classical NYO kids were there too, so it was like
Whoa.
a Zoom with 300 screaming kids in the chat just going, "Jacob, Jacob, I love you so much."
Oh,
Oh my gosh. And we couldn't get like any, he answered a couple of their questions, but he played songs on his, MIDI keyboard, and it was so wonderful. And it was great. But yeah, it was kind of hard we couldn't really talk to him because there were 300 other kids with
yeah,
us.
sure. Well, I had to assume that, like, and your reaction, like just laughing, like, is kind of what I had expected a little bit, because it's like at that point, just like watching him in real time do what he does and just destroy all of it in the best possible way. I feel like you can't help but just like throw your hands up in the air and just like laugh.
Yeah.
Just be like, what's happening right now? What are we witnessing?
Yeah, I immediately after the masterclass like went to my piano and tried to do like whatever he was talking about, and I was like, man, I can't do that.
Yeah,
Oh
right.
my God. Yeah, it was super inspiring.
Yeah, man. Whew, that guy. And another thing too is that, like, I mean, the NYO Jazz experience too, like watching you do like those Zoom interview masterclasses with like Gerald Clayton and
Mhm.
Christian Sands. And so I have to assume, even though like there's a whole bunch of them that are like coming into the fold, and like Sean Jones and then Jacob Collier and Wynton Marsalis, like, was it ever lost on you guys, or was it always just like, whoa, we are in the room, like virtual room, but like we're in the room with these people? Did it ever get old, or was it all just like, huh, like the whole time?
I think that, well, it definitely wasn't. They did a good job with what they could do virtually, right? Because I mean, I'm gonna be honest, like even with all of the things that they did for us and all of the great, music we made virtually, it's not gonna be the same.
Yeah.
It was sad. We were all really sad. So I think we definitely tried to be like, oh man, like we're gonna be in a Zoom with Wynton, woo, right? 'Cause, that's all we had. Which is it's still a great opportunity. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, no, we were excited, and it wasn't the same as being in the room, but it was still pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, talking about like age and I guess the like attainability thing, I feel like most people see like the jazz musicians that are in the top tier, like the most happening folks that are in the scene, like as this sort of like quasi like inattainable, unattainable status, right? Where it's like, or position to be in. And like, I feel like age, just like we were talking about, can be a vehicle for some people to like invalidate young musicians in general. But then, we see people, and again, I'm going to be naming a lot of the same people, but like we see people who are younger musicians that are super killing, like you and April and Summer and Joey Alexander, and I mean Jacob Collier for that matter too, although he's like in an entirely different universe of just like, we don't know where he's living, but we would love to be there, at least to Airbnb in that place for a second or two. But like the flip side of that argument, I think, where we see like the people who are in the top part of the scene is when we see like these middle generation or younger, but like in their like late 20s, early 30s, people like Veronica and Emmett Cohen and Benny Benack and all these different people. So then it becomes this thing where it's like, oh, maybe that could be a possibility, but they're just so good, and I don't think I could ever get to like that level. And this is, I feel like, what middle school and high school students probably think a lot of the time. But then they see people like, how I was saying, like you and Joey and Summer and all these different people who are like on the cusp of now like being like 18, 19, 20. And I feel like it gives this whole kind of encouragement that it's like, for people who are in the 7th grade through 12th grade, that it's like, oh, this could potentially be a thing. I mean, there's no doubt that it has to be met with like the utmost discipline, and you really have to be focusing on your craft and everything. But I'm curious if you had people that, if that was even a consideration of you, where you were looking at people at where you're at now in your age range and your playing ability, that were like, oh, this is a possibility, as opposed to just looking at the greats and being like, I hope to get there one day, but jury's out, So what do you think?
Well, I think that yeah, it's really interesting. You said that. Now that I think about it, like when I was first starting to, I didn't really start to shed until sophomore year. So I was playing in that big band since seventh grade, but it was really, sophomore year is when I found out about the Grammy band, and I was more in the mindset of, making something of myself because, the kids at high school in my section, I was the only girl. They were so mean to me and they'd tell me that I sucked and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, man, maybe if I like make this band, maybe they'll like finally treat me like I'm one of them, right? That was the mindset I had. So I started looking into those bands and I saw those kids that were in that. And I honestly, I looked up more to them than I did to like the greats of, our time, right?
Sure.
And so, yeah, like, and that's kind of the culture that's been going on. Like, you make one of these bands, you've got a whole, like, squad of kids looking up to you. It's really weird. And then when you become one of those kids and you have other kids looking up to you, it becomes even weirder because that's what I was doing 4 years ago, right? But it's almost like you become like a mini celebrity to like these high school kids. It's really weird. It's a weird culture.
Well, how does that feel like because I'm sure there's a different expectation. We all like, whether it's anything in life, like we think, oh, once we get to this point, or like, oh, to be in their shoes, and then you're there. So is it what you expected, or is it like, why are these people looking up to us? We don't know like anything, or like, is it that imposter syndrome, or is it a little bit more like, oh yeah, no, this feels like the natural progression?
Yeah, I think I definitely thought that by now I'd be more well, because I thought, oh, when I get to that point, I'm not gonna have to, have these self-doubt, issues, or I'm not gonna have to, right? Like,
Yeah.
I looked at those kids and thought, man, they're so good. They can play over all the changes and they can, do this and that, and they're going to go off and be great. But then you're in their shoes and it's like, man, every day I'm like, I suck.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Right.
the same thing. It never goes away. Especially Summer was one of those kids that I looked up to. I still am. I'm in love with Summer Camargo. She's like my favorite person in the world. And so I was like, man, I want to be Summer. I want to meet her. I want to be your best friend.
Yeah.
And then I met her and I was like, oh, she's just a normal teenage girl like me who plays the trumpet. Like,
Right.
so now I'm like, Summer is my best friend now, which is crazy to say.
Yeah.
If you know Veronica Leahy, the saxophone player.
I know her name and I've heard her a couple times, but I couldn't say like, oh, I know everything about. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, but yeah, she's like one of those kids too. Just all of these kids that I watched doing these things, and now I know them personally very well. It's like, they're not, they're godlike players. They're amazing players,
Sure.
but they're still human beings. Like, you don't really humanize these people until you meet them. It's really weird.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing too, like you saying that you didn't really start to shed until sophomore year, which as soon as you said that, I mean, all of the trumpet players or improvisers in the world are just throwing up, paper. They're like, they have all their notes and then they're like, all right, well, whatever. Cause like you would think that you had been like shedding this stuff since the dream, right? So I guess like the natural inclination when you're getting into jazz is not to start transcribing all of these crazy bop solos, right? It's usually like, okay, let me get like familiar with melodies. Let me get familiar with lyrics if applicable, like all these different things. It's not like the go-to thing isn't like, okay, well, let me go to YouTube and slow it down to 25%, and do this, which is such a privileged position to be in like the 21st century, right? It gives a whole nother like appreciation to the people in like the 70s transcribing Bird, right? But so what was it somebody that was being like, yeah, you should go transcribe these solos, or was it just like, this is such an interesting and like intricate thing, I need to figure that out and I need to break this down to the science. What was the motivation behind transcribing?
I don't really know. I had a teacher. I never took lessons with him. I maybe took one jazz lesson a year. And when I found out about Grammy Band, um, I was in that mindset of, man, I got to make this band so these kids in my section will finally treat me like a human being. So I didn't know what transcribing was. I had no idea that was a thing that people. Um, I started listening to these Grammy Band auditions of these other kids doing it. And I was like, man, I want to be just like them. So I started transcribing before I even transcribed, any of those, Miles or anybody.
Sure.
I transcribed these Grammy Band solos because that's what I was looking up to at the time. And I just memorized like these solos of these other kids, and I had no idea what I was doing. And that's kind of where, I later I was telling my teacher, I was like, oh yeah, I just listened to the recording of these kids doing it and just did what they did. And he's like, oh, that's transcribing, right? Like that's how you eventually improvise on your own. And I was like, this is what you're supposed to. So, that's kind of how I kind of just figured it out on my own. And I started, if I had to play a tune, I'd find all these recordings and say, okay, I'm going to listen to all these recordings and, find lines I like and, blah, 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 and transcribe whole solos. And that's kind of just how I got hit. People say that I have like a crazy amount of language, and I'm like, it's just because I've only been transcribing.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, that is a testament too of like not viewing improvising as this like kind of superficial kind of way of improvising and transcribing where it's like, oh, I'm going to get all these licks. It's more of just like, oh no, like I want to know what they're doing. I want to like attain this like ability. I think that's like the most earnest way to go about it. And that's what you really see. I mean, sure, we have these people who are like super killing and also like super arrogant or have like egos or something like that. But I feel like that's where you see the most like dedicated musicians who it's like, it's never enough. I need to like go and do this, which that's another whole thing to be said about like mental health of just, being like, okay, I'm okay with where I'm at, but just always kind of earnestly seeking the next thing. But it's sad too, though, and we were laughing about it, but I almost felt bad laughing. I kind of like had my head down about the fact that you were like, oh yeah, I want like these people to finally respect me. And it was like, oh yeah, haha. But then also like, what a terrible culture that we live in where like women in jazz have like an entire other, like even as like passive as the people in or I don't even know if it was entirely passive, it could have been aggressive, of the people in the music store saying, no, play flute, play clarinet, something that is more not genderfied, but like that's not a word. But
that is right, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess like I'd be curious like to hear you touch on that. Also, like you put on Instagram the other day, and we talked about it last night just to make sure it was okay to talk about. But the whole thing of people saying, oh yeah, like women have an easier time like in jazz and getting all these positions because there needs like the diversity spot or whatever, which is so clearly not true. Whenever you look at the makeup of most big bands or combos, singer is usually like designated to the being female is usually designated to the singer spot like unfairly. So what has that been like for you, like, and how does it affect your like psyche of like continuing on every day?
Right. Yeah. It's I think that's like the one thing that I struggle with, because don't get me wrong, like every good jazz musician that I've met has had self-doubt issues and self-image issues, and we're always thinking that we suck. Like that's just what happens.
Right.
But before high school, I had a really big ego because I was kind of that star band kid in the district, right? And I never really had any competition and never really had anybody question me. And then all of a sudden I got to high school and tried to do my thing. I was an okay trumpet player freshman year. I was like above average for a freshman in high school. And my section mates didn't like that. And they didn't like that I was taking the solos, and they didn't like that I was, trying to move up the ladder.
Right.
And literally like the first day I was in marching band, loved marching band, but I was the only girl in my section, and the first thing that was said to me that I remember was one of the kids came up to me and he was like, "Oh, you're a woman. Like you must be bad." Like, what?
Ooh.
Just yeah. So that kind of mentality, my section in high school, just the kids were so competitive, so nasty to me. They'd talk behind my back and call me a bitch, excuse my language. But you know, that was it kind of wrecked me. And that was the first, you know, experience that I really had with being treated differently in music because of my gender. Besides, you know, at the music store when I was younger, but you know, that's what pushed me to start studying. That's the whole reason why I really started to practice. And obviously now I do it because I love it and I love this music and I love the people. But that's the original reason why I got into it. And you know, when I started making the bands, they still didn't treat me how I thought. You know, I thought, okay, I'm going to make the band, and then they're going to be like, "Oh, Kellin, we're so sorry.
Yeah.
We're sorry
Yeah.
that we did that to you." No, like I made the band, never congratulated me, never said anything to me. Just, you know, and then once you get to that national level where you're exposed fully to everybody else, well, then other people started to pick on me, like professional musicians, professional teachers. There
Whoa.
was a, yeah, there was a whole situation. Um, oh man, it's so nasty. This he actually goes to school with me right now, but his old mentor, he actually made like he made like Instagram accounts about me, and he made fake Instagram accounts to like make up false accusations and say that I was only making these bands because of the woman card, and um, made like a whole entire account like dedicated to just like making fun of me and stuff basically. And he's like 64. He's an old man.
Oh, well, have him go head to head with you on the West End Blues Challenge, and then
Yeah,
and then
right.
we'll see his chops peter out really quickly.
Yeah, but you know, that was the peak of that whole woman thing for me. That's when I really realized that, you know, what's going on to young women like me is not okay,
Yeah.
because that, you know, I'm still recovering from that. I still have to like wake up in the morning and like go and perform and tell myself like okay, you're a good player. Like you are not trash. Like you
Yeah.
think you know, like that could it plummeted me down. I thought like I was the absolute worst for so long. And that's why I'm being such a big advocate for it now, because
Yeah.
I know that there's other girls out there who are thinking the same thing. And I'm like, it's not true. You have to get past it. It's
Yeah.
just super difficult.
And the terrible thing about that too, but also it's terrible, but also could be comforting to younger women, like looking up to that, is that it just because you're an advocate for it doesn't mean you're not still dealing with the repercussions. It's not like, and now I'm on the other side of it and everything's cool now and everyone treats me with respect on every gig. It's like, no, we can build each other up. We can be advocates for each other while still going through the same struggle. Um, yeah, man, Kellin, I'm so sorry. That is like the absolute worst. Um,
It's it happened, and I think it needed to happen, because otherwise I wouldn't have realized like what I wanted to do with this whole, you know, woman thing. And
Sure. Yeah. And like, I mean, like I said, my hometown of Lake Jackson is a very, very conservative hometown. Like, and my views, you know, without going way into it, if anyone wants to know my political views, they can look at my Instagram and they can look at my Facebook. But like my views went like this entirely. And it was almost entirely because of Lydia and our partnership over the past 5 years, because she is the most like caring and like she listens, and she would let me say all of my very problematic views and then would just like lightly challenge me on those and kind of like switch things around. But I remember like in high school, like and I still play, but I would not claim it to be. I would say it is definitely my secondary instrument. But my main instrument in high school was trumpet, and I was in jazz band, and I was in marching band and such. And I noticed that as well, that like we had in the course of 4 years, like 6 female trumpet players, like and we were like a 6A school though. Like it was like, I think we probably had 50 trumpet players, 55 trumpet players in the program. So it was a very, very small number of female trumpet players. But yeah, like people would be saying those things of like, oh yeah, they're only in Concert Wins 1 because of, because Concert Wins 1 is directed by the only female director and she wanted representation. And it's just like the stupidest thing, but like they could play people under the table like all the time, and those were the people who were the section leaders and all this different stuff. And it was just, I think when it comes down to it, it's just a crazy amount of male insecurity. Like they feel like, oh yeah, this other guy can be better than me, but because there is this at a community level, because there can be things on the national level. I mean, certainly in like the media we watch and everything and representation there, but like when an entire community feels one way, that's why we get like little bubbles, right? And I think whenever the community treated it all like that, and it was like, it was very clearly this divide where it's like, the flutes and the clarinets and piccolo, and then the saxophones and bass clarinets and bassoon and oboe. And then there was where the brass started. And I mean, you could just like draw a line with a few outliers where it was like female side of the band, male side of the band. And I mean, in my experience, I felt like it got worse as it got to lower brass. Like the person who got the brunt of it was a female bass trombone player. So yeah.
Right. Yep.
The worst.
Same thing. Yep. Sorry. Same thing at my high school. Like it was me, and then I think there were 2 other female trumpet players, and not a lot of very, very high male energy. And I often wonder like, would I have been treated differently by my section if I were a guy? Would they have been more accepting of me taking that leadership role? But obviously we'll never know.
Right. Do you feel like that obviously this is gonna this kind of stigma and discrimination is everywhere we go to a certain degree. Some places are more highly concentrated than others. But do you feel like since you've moved to New York that it has been less prevalent and more welcoming?
Oh, for sure. I think that a big part of it too, like you said, is that insecurity. And I think that now being here at MSM, like, everybody's a little insecure, but everybody's at a level now where they're not going to put other people down.
Right.
The guys here, especially in my class, they've been very welcoming to us, and they've been very supportive of the whole women in jazz thing. There's been a couple people who have been a little, but they're gone.
Sure.
But yeah, overall, like, people are very supportive here, and I think it also has to do a lot with, it's very, very liberal here. Very, yes, so yeah, it's been a lot better since I've been here, for sure.
Whenever you're listening, and not to just like very, crudely pivot, but I am curious about like the people who you listen to that are resulting in the like such high level of your playing. Who are you listening to on like a regular basis?
Oh man, well, I study with Ingrid Jensen now, so I've been, listening to, oh my gosh, I knew of her and I, loved her playing. Didn't really, listen a lot, but now, I'm like so lucky. I listen to Roy Hargrove, I listen to Clifford, Miles, Booker Little, who else? Wheaton, of course, big inspiration. So those are like kind of Freddie Hubbard. Those are kind of my main guys and women.
Yeah, sure. Well, another thing too is that I found in my listening that with the exception of my some could call obsessive nature of Kurt Elling, I try not to listen to singers too terribly much because of the fact that singers are really just supposed to be listening to instrumentalists. I feel like there's that kind of thing where it's like instrumentalists listen to singers for phrasing and stuff like that, and vice versa. And if I'm not listening to like Kurt or Benny or Veronica, or try to listen to Harry Connick Jr. though too, because like he's just like so freaking swinging, man. Like just that one, I have like a DVD of his like big band. I think it's at Madison Square Garden, but maybe not. It's a big band thing, but it's just like, holy crap, this dude swings ass. Like it's so good, but like whenever I'm not listening to them, I'm trying to listen to mostly trumpet players because that's like what my primary instrument was, and like pianists, oddly enough, just because I feel like if I'm listening to Bill Evans, like it's just taking me to this like transcendent place. So do you like to be listening to instruments that are not your primary, or things that like you don't even play at all?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying more to listen to, I've had so many conversations with people about, how they don't want to sound like, their instrument. I have this friend who plays trombone. He's at Juilliard. He's insane.
Mm.
But he doesn't sound like a trombone player because he doesn't listen to them. He listens to trumpet players.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to get into that mindset, and I started listening to more sax players like Cannonball and Coltrane, Dick Oates. Oh my gosh, if I could sound like anybody, like as a trumpet, like Dick Oates on trumpet, that's like what I want to. Oh my gosh,
Okay.
crazy. But yeah.
I need to put that down. I don't listen to Dick Oates, so I
Oh
should.
my
Yeah.
gosh, he's amazing. Oh my gosh. But yeah, sax players. I love Oscar Peterson,
Mm.
great. Um, Red Garland. Who
Yeah.
else? Yeah, and I listen to vocalists. I listen to Ella and Sarah Vaughan and Billie Holiday. But I definitely need to get more into, other instruments.
Yeah, I would like to pick your brain and again, I want to be respectful of your time too. So if at any point you're like, hey, I
Oh,
gotta go. So, one thing that I have toyed around with a lot in the past several years is, not that it needs any legitimizing, but just like legitimizing that we need to like keep like in their original form, or at least respectful and cognizant of the original form of standards and the Great American Songbook, and just like standards that are not the Great American Songbook, like keeping those alive, but also I don't know if you know who Clark Summers is, but he's Kurt's bass player, and incredible guy, really, really sweet, and has been like somewhat of an informal mentor to me. And I remember after my second record, I I did like that stupid like 19-year-old thing at the time back in 2017 where I was like, hey, or no, I was 21, but so worse. But I was like, hey, like you can totally say no. We had a mutual friend, and he had like hooked us up with like meeting in Austin. And I was like, you can totally say no. I won't be offended at all. I just put out a record. I don't want like unchallenged affirmation. Like it could be as simple as like 3 words, just like tearing it apart or whatever. But just like what about this might be hitting, and what do I really need to focus on? Because I mean, second record and also like 21, like there's so
right.
much to learn. And he was very, very gracious, sent me back this like 6-page email that like the one of the paragraphs ended up being the liner notes of my third album I put out this past summer, which was, he said, I guess what I'm asking in a general sense is, how are you connecting with the material in a way that resonates in 2018? Are you/we mining up in the material elements up until this point that have yet to be revealed? Are you adequately, and now I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, are you adequately representing the canonical practitioners of our respective craft? And if not, what facets of study should you and I embark upon to bear even a distant resemblance to my crazy musical uncle and deserve a seat at the musical table or the kids table for that matter. He's like, things like that. And that was just an excerpt of that. I remember reading that in the middle of a Shipley's Donuts parking lot over and over and over and over and over again for like an hour and a half. And so that really forced me to start thinking about arrangements that were a little bit more, what I would come to realize is like a little bit more of like an ECM vibe, or just things that are not just as typical as conventional harmonic changes, but getting a little outside the box. So for someone who, you know, really pays a lot of attention to like bop and bebop language and this very kind of the longevity of the craft of what is most widely regarded as the most popular or most recognizable to the layman, how do you feel about that that kind of idea of going down the path of things like Gerald Clayton and Brad Mehldau, where they're taking Radiohead tunes, you know, and putting it into the jazz idiom? Like, where are you kind of at in your thought process with that?
Yeah, I used to be very, I guess, I don't know what the word is, more of like a jazz purist, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
only the classic stuff, don't change it, no hip-hop, no R&B, I hate that stuff. And now I've kind of grown, and I realize now that, like, you know, we're not going to go backwards. Like, jazz back then, that's, you know, that's for us to learn from. But we're, you know, if we want this music to evolve and to be, you know, continue to live, we have to kind of do that. We have to take, you know, I love the idea of taking standards and making them, you know, modernized or changing them. I think it's a very cool way to make something new out of something old, right?
Yeah, and I love that. It's like short and sweet. I need to take notes from that. Sometimes I just like ramble on about things, but it is a very like interesting topic to me of because some people, like at the very, very top of the scene, would be more like what you had said, like a more jazz purist. And I think they're completely validated in that. But I do think also, like you said, like, yeah, it's there, like we learn from it. It was there. And what popped into my mind was like, it was new at that point too. And so now, like, I think it's like almost like a responsibility that's bestowed upon anyone who wants to further the craft, that it's like, okay, but what are you going to say? Like, and there's nothing wrong with doing things straight ahead, but even when doing something straight ahead, there needs to be that feeling of being genuine and bringing something to the table. You know, another part of that email that Clark wrote was, you know, these standards have been recorded hundreds of times by hundreds of different people. So, you know, what makes, and again, I'm paraphrasing now, but like, it's like, what makes your recording worthy of being recorded? Or is it just another thing that, like, when someone searches the tune on Spotify, just like the millions of, you know, things that pop up. So yeah, anyways, things that I think about on a daily basis and boil over.
Great, like, discussion question. That was great.
For sure. So a couple last things to ask. The way we kind of end is talking about like records to check out and recommendations, because I feel like with tunes, with records, we could be listening like every day, nonstop, doing nothing else, and we would only barely scratch the surface of what to check out. And everyone's experience of listening is so profoundly different. So if you had something that you would suggest to everyone listening, be like, go check this out right now, like absolutely worth your time.
Let me see. I have all of my favorite recordings on one playlist. So my favorite tune of all time, I feel like, I don't know why, I've like talked to people and asked them if they know the tune, and they're like, no, I haven't listened to that. The Tattooed Bride by Duke Ellington, I think, is the best. That's my favorite recording of all time of everything. So that's like the one, if you're asking me what to listen to, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you said it was the Tattooed Bride?
Yeah, the Tattooed Bride.
Wow, okay. That's awesome. I love like those like out titles. It's I guess not that out, but like Saga Paris and Crab Feathers, or man, do you know that tune Sharpoy that's on And His Mother Called Him Bill?
Mm-mm.
I've only been able to find one recording of it, and it's like a Duke record, like for Billy Strayhorn, because it's a Strayhorn tune, and it's like one of the most killing things. Like it's just
What
so
is it?
good. It's either Charpoy or Sharpoy. It's CHARPOY. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I mean that whole record is super killing. But
yeah.
yeah, I would say that's something to check out as well. But yeah, I'll check out the Tattooed Bride. Is there another record, full record that you'd be like, yeah, go check this out too?
Man, basically everything from RH Factor. That's great stuff. I don't really listen to full albums. I more listen to, just individual tracks. But yeah, anything off of I think it's called, shoot, let me find it. Oh, one really good tune. Maurice, not tune, album. Maurice Brown, On My Way Home.
Okay.
That's a great record. And then I'm trying to find uh the RH Factor Hard Groove, that album. That
Okay.
entire album is great too.
Cool. Awesome. Well, then we will put that on there. And then the last question, and this is like my favorite, I always love leaving this for the end, is we all have crazy stories of like gigs from hell where things just like went way up the wall, went sideways, and you just are stuck there thinking like, what is this real? Is this real life? So do you have any like exceptional story of just like,
Hmm.
what's happening?
I'm trying to think. Let's see. Um, there was one gig. Man, I'm sure there's like a better story, and I'm just not remembering it. But we had a gig when I was in the Next Gen band. We had a gig in Canada. I think it was the Vancouver Jazz Festival or something like that.
Okay.
We were playing there, and we were in the middle of a tune, and this big, I don't like hornet or something. It was ginormous. Just started flying around the band, and nobody could pay attention to the music. Everybody like was like stopping and starting like every 5 seconds because this bee would just be like
Yeah.
all. So we had like the worst because none of us could pay attention. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's man. I feel like I've definitely had worse gigs. Um, but yeah, no, that was crazy, and we played not very well, and it was kind of nasty.
Sure. Yeah, I mean the stories have there was one that was similar to that. I think Kate Cordum, I don't know if you know who she is. She's at Frost, and great singer. But she like said that she was like singing the national anthem at a baseball game and was like running around the field in the middle of singing it because there was like, yeah, which like that's like crazy too because it's like all eyes on you. And we even had like somebody who like some, I guess, disgruntled ex-lover came in and was like, "You done played me for the last time," to someone and pulled out a gun, started firing. They had to like
Oh my.
pull him over the thing. Yeah, there's a trumpet player who was up in New York who splits his time between New York and Austin, COVID excluding, named Mike Sailors, who had he was doing a gig up there in New York and it was a wedding and the MC ran in late and he was the band leader because he was coming from another gig and then grabbed the mic and was like sight reading off like the people to introduce coming in and then he got to the mother of the bride and he was like mother of the bride deceased. Oh no, just like just
No.
really like any my close collaborator David Mescatique, great pianist here in Austin, he had a situation where he was playing trombone because that was his first instrument and was playing for the mafia and was held hostage at like gunpoint until like sunrise because
Wow.
they were just like keep playing all through the night. Yeah,
Wow.
just like some crazy stories. So it's always fun to just like hear what people have to say. Like if nothing else, people should go and check out like the ends of every episode because they are
I
just
I will say I did just remember. I think this actually could probably count, not as crazy as those, but in March we were supposed to have, so March is like Jazz Band of America time. That's when I traveled to Indianapolis and did that. Um, and we had 2 days of rehearsals and then a performance, right? So Oh my God, this is gonna like be such an awful story to like tell my kids, man, about 2020. We were getting ready to, we rehearsed, had all of our tunes ready, we were ready to go, and then literally the night before the concert, they come in during a rehearsal and they look like something's really wrong, and we're like, what's going on? And they go, hey guys, so the governor just shut down Indiana. We have to cancel the festival. You guys can't play. COVID hit while we were there at the honor band, and we had to stay in that hotel for 5 days on lockdown. Couldn't go home, couldn't do anything, just had to stay there. That was like the craziest, like,
Whoa.
it was insane.
Yeah, because that's like a mini version of the cruise ship thing where everybody was like stranded on the cruise ship and just like, we just want to go home, please. Like, please just let us off, right? But obviously precautions. I guess like if nothing else, maybe it was nice. They probably like delivered meals to your door. Like maybe it was that.
Yeah, they fed us.
Yeah.
They fed us.
Well, yeah. Well, I would hope that they fed it. I was just saying like there's like maybe it was as convenient as like, all right, here's like a extended vacation stay and room service every day. Here we go.
Right.
You know.
Yeah,
so.
it was okay. We were stressed out, but it was okay.
For sure. Silver linings everywhere if we can find them, right? Well, cool. Well, Kellin, I can't tell you how much I enjoy talking to you. I hope we can do it again soon, and I try to make it up to New York as often as possible. So hopefully we'll be able to meet up at the jam or just like make the hang at some point soon. But
yeah, for sure. Love to hang with you. Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on. This will release tomorrow, actually. So
great. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. All right. Stay safe. I'll see you soon.
Right.
Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you.